Welcome back to another episode of Vikings Latest, everybody. I'm your host, Cole Smith, and today we're going to get back into draft talk. Yesterday we talked about Rob Brzezinski, Vikings interim GM, and Kevin O'Connell, their approach to the draft and their offseason outlook, as well as Justin Jefferson's enthusiasm for Kyler Murray coming into the offense. Those three spoke to the media on Monday. So we kind of talked about on yesterday's podcast, took a little bit of a break from the prospects of the draft. I do encourage you guys to watch Tuesday's episode, kind of give you a little bit of a look behind the scenes on how the team is going to be looking in approaching this week's draft. But today we're going to get back into the actual prospects. And we're going to start out with Alec Lewis of The Athletic. He released his 7-round mock draft. He's very plugged into the Vikings. And at pick 18, he had the Vikings taking Kenyon Sadiq, tight end out of Oregon. Tight end isn't exactly the most pressing need for the Vikings in 2026, but he still has the Vikings taking Sadiq. Many teams around the league are starting to move towards multiple tight end looks, and Sadiq would be able to do that with the Vikings already having TJ Hawkinson and Josh Oliver on the roster. You get Sadiq on the field, able to kind of take advantage of defenses the way that like the Bears did with Colston Loveland last year, or the Packers with Tucker Kraft. This would give the Vikings a second, third option at tight end while also taking advantage of Jefferson on the outside, Jordan Addison on the other side of the field. Really opens up the middle of the field. Sadiq has tons of athleticism. He clocked in at the combine with the fastest time that we've seen in years. 23.24 miles per hour at the combine. That's fastest among tight ends over the past several seasons. Able to really stretch the middle of the field in a way that Hawkinson hasn't been able to do. That's never really been Hawkinson's game, as being the most athletic tight end on the field, but especially after his injury in 2023, he just hasn't really felt like he's been the same sort of threat in the passing game for the Vikings. So this isn't meaning that Sadiq has to replace Hawkinson completely in 2026. It just gives the Vikings another receiving option, and then in 2027 he can step into that tight end one role when Hawkinson likely departs via free agency. So I like this move. This is kind of the move that I've been going towards recently, because I don't think that either the top or any of the top receivers are going to be available at pick 18, and I'm not necessarily even advocating for the Vikings to go after receiver unless just something insane like Mekhi Lemon or Carnell Tate were to somehow fall to 18. But I like this. It's a different option. The Vikings just feel like they've kind of fallen behind the progression of the league, the evolution of the tight end position. Hawkinson's he just feels like a traditional kind of tight end. And we just see more athleticism at that position. Like I said, Hawkinson just hasn't been the same in recent years since that ACL injury. I think that this is kind of a forward thinking move while also helping the team immediately in 2026 with a bit of a wrinkle. So I like it. The team needs instant contributors in the draft, and I think Sadiq does that, even if he's not just like a day one traditional starter. So why does Alec Lewis's opinion matter? Like I said, he is very respected in the Vikings beat, but he also projected the Vikings taking Donovan Jackson in last year's mock draft. He did have the Vikings trading down in that draft, but they did ultimately land Jackson in his mock. And the Vikings did not trade down in last year's draft, but they did get Jackson at pick 24. I think they kind of panicked and stuck in pick there. I still think they could have traded down and accumulated more picks. I don't know if they would have landed Jackson, but that means that Lewis is in tune with the Vikings think tank. And in 2024, he had the Vikings taking defensive lineman Byron Murphy out of Texas and quarterback Bo Nix out of Oregon. Vikings didn't go with either of those players. Byron Murphy was off the board by the time the Vikings made their pick at 17 when they took Dallas Turner. And they didn't take Bo Nix, but they did get a quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. We saw how that worked out. Probably would have been better if they took Bo Nix. But Lewis at least has a good pulse on what the Vikings are thinking heading into the draft. So right now he has Kenyon Sadiq at pick 18 for the Vikings. Now, like I said, he has a 7 round mock draft. So who else did he have? He had the Vikings at pick 49 taking Arizona cornerback slash safety Traden Stukes. This guy's been getting a lot of steam lately. If you look at Twitter, you might see some really outlandish kind of comments regarding Stukes. Some people are saying he's the best safety prospect in years, which is pretty insane for a guy who's probably going to go on day 2. This is just kind of typical draft smokescreen season stuff. But Stukes has been very highly regarded, pretty highly regarded throughout the draft process. Maybe not best safety we've ever seen, but he has been in this second, third round range. Looked really good at the Senior Bowl when I was down there. And this safety class, this is kind of why I haven't been big on getting a safety at pick 18, because the safety class has a lot of depth, and you can address safety, get a day 1 starter at safety in the second, third round, maybe even fourth round. The Vikings don't have a fourth round pick currently, but like if you were to trade down, you can find quality safeties later in this draft. So I kind of like this move. Go after somebody like Sadiq early on, and then still address safety and get somebody who can contribute instantly and probably start. Stukes would be a good option here. At the 82nd overall pick, first pick of the third round for the Vikings, he has the Vikings taking Caleb Elam's-Orr, TCU linebacker. Vikings did bring back Eric Wilson at linebacker and Ivan Pace Jr. But Blake Cashman, he's still going to be on the team, but he is going to be 30 here soon. Eric Wilson, he's older. And Ivan Pace Jr., I think the team just doesn't super trust him at all. I wouldn't be surprised if he's not on the opening day roster at all. I think there is room to add another off-ball linebacker. I think the Vikings could go off-ball linebacker at 49 if they were to go with Anthony Hill Jr. Out of Texas. But here, Lewis has the Vikings taking Elam's-Orr. At pick 97, the Vikings' second, third round pick, he has the Vikings taking Nebraska running back Emmett Johnson. There have been some concerns about Johnson's speed, but he is a Minneapolis native. He's been talking a lot about how he wants to be a Viking. He's a big fan of Adrian Peterson growing up. He makes a lot of guys miss. Like if you watch any of his highlights, any of his runs, he's making the first guy miss. He's very physical running back. So this wouldn't be as much of, there's some more athletic prospects at running back. This is more just your traditional kind of looking running back who can contribute. Aaron Jones is on the wrong side of 30. Jordan Mason, he's never carried a full workload. So this will give you like 3 options at running back. And then Johnson could, of course, be battling for the RB1 position in 2027. So kind of, not as athletic as Sadiq, not as dynamic, but kind of the same sort of thought process as Sadiq, where he can contribute right away. Emmett Johnson can contribute right away in 2026. And then in 2027, he could become the full-time starter. So we're not going to go too far into the rest of the picks because a lot of people's interest honestly wanes after the first round. But one interesting pick is at pick 163 in the 5th round. The Vikings taking Parker Brailsford, center out of Alabama. He's kind of under the radar. The Vikings need to walk out of this draft with some sort of center. It would be surprising to me, at least personally, if the Vikings didn't address center sometime in the 3rd round. Even Alec Lewis talks about this. There's options like Connor Lew out of Auburn, Logan Jones out of Iowa, Jake Slaughter out of Florida, and Sam Hecht out of K-State. Those are 4 guys who could and should probably be available, at least 2 of the 4, when the Vikings are picking at pick 82 or 97. So But he does have Brailsford, who is smart. He's athletic. Vikings going to be going to more of a zone scheme, as Lewis said. Brailsford kind of checks those boxes. He wouldn't be pressured into starting right away. The Vikings are probably going to be going into the season with Blake Brandel as a starter if this scenario plays out the way it does. But Brailsford could be a guy who could be in line to start later in the season if, God forbid, an injury happens to Brandel, or if he just ends up, outright winning the position. That really shock a lot of people, but that'd be good. That's what this team needs. They need late round guys to contribute. They need anybody, any rookie to contribute. At worst, 2027 could be the year that Brailsford becomes the full-time starter at center. We've seen late round guys become longtime starters at center in the past for the Vikings. Matt Burke back in the day, John Sullivan later on. So it is a position that you can address late and get a quality player long term. So now moving on to Adam Schefter. He weighed in on the Vikings situation in the draft this week. He talked about how the Vikings haven't really done a good job at getting a front line defender in many years. And he believes the Vikings are going to change that this year. I don't know if this means that he thinks that the Vikings are going to be going defense, um, or I guess I can't even tell if he means like defense period, if he means defensive line, because the Vikings haven't drafted interior defensive linemen in the first round since 2013. This would be kind of at least at pick 18, it'd be a little surprising to see the Vikings go defensive tackle. If they were to go defensive tackle with their first pick, I think they'd have to trade down. Alec Lewis, even when he had the Vikings going Kenyon Sadiq at 18, he did not rule out the possibility of a trade down. If they were to trade down and try getting a defensive tackle, I think it'd be Cade McDonald out of Ohio State. He was the best run defending interior defensive lineman in the country last year. Or maybe even Caleb Banks, Florida, even though he is dealing with a foot injury. That dude on the last 2 days of Senior Bowl practices was destroying guys. So if you get the best version of Caleb Banks, Vikings could get an interior force. I still see it being Kenyon Sadiq. If they were my pick, Alec Lewis sees that, but Adam Schefter is not ruling out the possibility of a defender. And honestly, Alec Lewis said that there is a possibility that the Vikings could just be waiting for somebody like a top prospect at defense to slip to pick at 18. So if it's like somebody like Mansour Delane, LSU, maybe that's a trade up. Or Caleb Downs, Ohio State safety, if he were to start slipping, maybe it's somebody like that that really changes things. So Adam Schefter, he's going kind of against what Alec Lewis is saying. He's seeing defense. It's something to keep an eye on. Honestly, there are so many different ways that this draft could go. And that kind of leads us into our last topic, which is the odds. The odds are kind of showing that the Vikings could be all over the place. According to DraftKings, the top two players that the Vikings are favored to get are safeties. Dylan Thieneman, plus 320. It's not super surprising. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, Toledo safety, he's plus 550. But then DraftKings has Kenyon Sadiq, plus 850. Jermon McCoy, Tennessee safety, or Tennessee cornerback, plus 1,000. Monroe Freeling, Georgia offensive lineman, plus 1,200. Caden Proctor, offensive tackle for Alabama, plus 1,200. So even offensive line could be a sneaky pick here. I've been kind of hearing some rumblings that the Vikings may not be completely opposed to going offensive line if that's how the draft falls to them, because we saw last year Christian Darrisaw, he never seemed fully recovered from his ACL injury that he suffered in 2024. He was in and out of the lineup, which is very surprising, very concerning, and that kind of just showed just the problems that the Vikings had on the offensive line. Brian O'Neill, he missed a few games. He's going to be a free agent after the season. If the Vikings were to go offensive line here, this would be kind of like the reasoning for Kenyon Sadiq. Obviously, you're not going to be running much three offensive tackle sets It's not really a position that you're subbing guys in and out of the lineup for, but this would be more about get a guy who can be the full time starter in 2027. Don't completely rule it out. I'd still be pretty surprised it'd be a minor upset if the Vikings went offensive line, but don't completely rule it out yet. I do find it interesting that there's two offensive linemen on here before you even see a receiver, and some people have been mocking a receiver here. So super fascinating. The Vikings could go so many different ways in this draft at pick 18. They could trade up, they could stick and pick, they could trade down out of the first round entirely. And I don't even think any of that's really that bad of a thing as long as the Vikings have a clear plan. I don't want them being going into the draft just overthinking this or dead set on doing one thing or the other. Sounds like Rob Brzezinski wants this draft board to fall to the Vikings and then adjust from there. So super stoked. I could not be more excited. Tomorrow we're gonna be finally getting some clarity, some finality to these picks. And I cannot wait to talk about them with you guys. Like, subscribe, continue to follow me. Like I said, check out Tuesday's episode to kind of get a feel for how Rob Brzezinski is viewing this. Sounds like he's going to be approaching this draft much differently than Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah did over the past 4 years, and that should be encouraging for fans and the team too. So thank you everybody for tuning in once again. Skol Vikings. We're days away from getting the newest generation of Vikings players on this team.